Let's talk about banks. And banks have been blamed for cutting their lending rate to private institutions, actually preferring to lend to government over lending to private institutions and consumers. So what does that mean? That most businesses are not able to borrow loans, access to capital imepungua. Well, what is the reason behind this? It's because, for one, you are lending to government. Yes, you might be lending them at a lower rate, but in as much as you're lending them at a lower rate, you're reducing the risk. Government, ukiekelea pesa kwa gava, in securities, in bonds, unless the government fails, you're always sure that you will get return on your investment. And one of the surest way to multiply your money is bonds, securities. They are always the most secure way of investing your money. And banks, nobody knows that better than our banks in Kenya. So, rather than kupea mwanabiashara pesa, alafu you start getting the excuses of, oh, the dog ate my homework, it's been a very bad environment, kasongo this, kasongo that. Why don't we just lend to the government and wait for the government to bring us good returns on our investment? So, inasemekana from the yields have been going down, because I remember there was a time at treasury bills were going for more than 18%. So the yields have gone down from a high of 19% to 13.65. But in as much as the yields have gone down, that does not mean that banks are willing to lend to the private sector. They are still favoring the bills and bonds. Why are they favoring them? In as much as they can lend to us at a lower rate, at a higher rate, and we make greater returns for them, they feel it's more secure there. Credit risk is lower. When you are giving credit to the government, the probability of them failing to pay is quite low as compared to lending to the private sector. What does that lead? Lack of capital. Tunaanza kwa zile points that led to migration in DRC. Lack of capital, scarcity, greener pastures, spirit of adventure. But we are looking at this point, a lack of capital. When you lack credit, you are not able to borrow credit for investment. Remember, we don't borrow to consume. You should borrow to invest. And money or credit ni kama mbegu. Ni kama yule mtu ambaye amekupea mbegu. Haukuli mbegu, unaenda kupanda ile mbegu. Kisha ukishapanda mbegu, yale mavuno ambayo unapata, ndio unaweza kuweka mbegu nyingine na pia unaweza kukula kutoka kwa yale mavuno. You eat of the fruit, you don't eat of the seed. Amen? Amen. But now, we don't have a seed because banks are borrowing from, banks are preferring to to lend to the government more than the people. That's why we have such an environment. And when the money is controlled by the government, we have such a place. If an entrepreneur wants to access 2 million, that entrepreneur and the access a loan of 2 million, it will be a direct injection. It's not just money that has come out to someone's hand. It will be a direct injection in the economy. How? Akuja afungue duka, aajiri mtu. One, there's a duka yenye imepata kazi. Kuna landlord mahali, duka yake imekombolewa. Number two, there's that painter who will be called to paint and maybe brand, furnish the place. Suppliers will be able to sell their goods. Kuna mtu anaingia kwa kazi. They might need a helping hand or two. A job will be created. That's the impact that credit has in society. It's a direct injection of money into the economy. And when now this money starts moving and circulating, moves from one hand to another, mtu amepewa loan, ameanza mjengo, hiyo mjengo kuna watu wameajiriwa pale, they are making their daily bread. Kuna foreman. Then once the building is over, there's a income generating activity. Kuna caretaker hapa. Na gava pia inapata tax. I mean, this landlord who mtu amejenga after getting credit, they'll be paying tax. That biashara, that serious business that has been opened because you are able to get credit, then this person is bringing tax, and that's how we all make money. We all grow together. But we live in a country where most of the money is controlled by the government, and then we wonder why there is no unemployment. There is no way government can lead in economic growth. There is no sustainable way or place. There's no way governed your economy. No. The money should be with the entrepreneurs. From the entrepreneurs, then we can talk about government, and then the people. Businessmen should be the richest people in a good economy, not politicians. But when you ask these politicians, they did business. Which business did you do? Every business requires you to wake up every day and work. And I actually feel bad that banks are favoring to lend to the government as opposed to the people, as opposed to the private sector. Because, for one, the banks are aiming at making a profit. They want to make money. And it's more difficult to make it in the private sector because, for one, you need an employee. Who will be appraising these loans, who will be checking, so you need more labor. As opposed to government. If you're processing a security or a bond for the government, how many employees do you need to analyze the risk? 10, 15 maybe. What if you're empowering SMEs? Kuna mtu akona jua kali yake pale, kuna mtu mwingine akona duka yake electronics, kuna mwingine ni distributor wa soda, wines and spirits. You need many employees to do that, and we've witnessed banks are actually firing people for very flimsy reasons. Because why do I need all this labor? And for banks, actually, the highest pesa mingi huenda sana kwa their biggest expense is labor. That's their greatest expense, human labor, human resource. Hiyo ndio the most expensive thing that a bank has to incur. So if I can reduce my expenses, the human resource, and give the government money, why not? Don't blame them. It's business. So yes, tumeachwa taabani, but I will blame the government. We should not be competing with the government to borrow. If the government gets out of the lending space, then we will see what happened ile time ya Moi. Pesa zilikuwa zinazungushwa na banks. Yes, banks would come down kwetu mobilizing for deposit. There is a bank I know, walikuanga na kagari fulani, turandrova, tulikuwa tunaenda kwa soko. Siku ya soko, wanajua kambi fulani kuna soko, wanakuja hapo. Wanachukua pesa, they take the deposits, and out of forming that relationship, then now you are able to borrow. They even call you, they say, hey, we see you are very active in your account, by the way, tunaweza kukopesha do. Does that happen nowadays? How often does your bank call you and tell you that, hey, we can empower you with a loan? How often? It shows that we are on the wrong trajectory as Kenya. The government should get out of the way na waache kuomba pesa kutoka kwa bank. Waende wakaombe pesa huko nje. We are the ones who should be borrowing money from banks, SACCOs, societies. Now, gava ikitoka kwa hiyo soko, what will happen? Watatuzungushia pesa, watatuletea pesa hapa kwetu. And you'll stop seeing these funny credit apps. And the credit will be cheap. And people don't refuse. Most people actually pay back their loans. A very few people, watu wachache sana fail to pay their loans. And actually, even when they fail to pay their loans with such a high interest rate, right now borrowing, assuming you're borrowing at a rate of like 25% per annum, how will you ever make money na urudishe hiyo pesa ya wenyewe? Difficult, right? So, kama biashara ni ngumu, loan unaitishwa hapa, the chances of you defaulting are higher. But wakitoka if government is out of the credit market, especially the domestic market, then the banks will have no other option but to come and empower us. Utaona hata wakiempower idea. But as long as government inaomba, they will always continue favoring hata wakiwapea lower rates, because the expense of doing this processing of a government loan or security is much lower If you are processing maybe, let's say 100 billion, let's say 50 billion to the government as one government bond, unahitaji just like 10-15 people. I don't know, just thinking wild. As compared to you are trying to inject 50 billion into the private sector. Hakuna mtu yote utampea 50 billion. Of course, kuna hii, you'll appraise this company, you'll appraise this carpenter and his furniture business. Different scenarios that will require you to have employees with actually different skill sets. Kuna mwenye ako kwa ground, you'll need maybe to make an analysis, you'll need a committee to do an appraisal. Labor. So, it will cost you a lot. But, if the government is out of the market, then hawatakuwa na option and they have to grow their money, they have to grow their loan books. Watakuja kwetu. So, it's high time we start calling for the government watoke kwa soko ya credit. Watoke soko by the way. Gava ifai kuwa soko. Soko ya credit, that's what I mean.